Welcome, folks, to this week's edition of Tech Sales Advice. I, of course, am your host, Chris White, and we're coming at you on a different day. Normally, these are Mondays. We had to grab a Wednesday this week due to schedules, but I'm absolutely delighted to welcome this week's guest. He's actually a second-time guest. I think it's your second time, and in fact, it probably should be more by now. Mr. Larson Stair. Larson is the CEO and co-founder of Gondola.ai. He joins us from, I think it's Denver, Colorado. You're based in, right?
You got it.
I know the last time you were with us, we were talking about jumping out of airplanes and all kinds of crazy stuff like that. Mr. Stair, how are you, sir? Welcome.
I am doing fantastic. I really appreciate you having me on the talker today.
It's good to see you, my friend. I think when you and I did this, it's probably been about 2 years ago that you first joined me for one of these conversations, and you and I had just recently met, and we were both starting our businesses, and here we are 2 years later. I've gotten to know Larson, a great deal more, and I can say without a moment's hesitation, he's someone I respect. He's someone I learn from, someone I enjoy speaking to. In fact, we've never even met in person, but that's a whole nother conversation. Your business has evolved a great deal, and I know you've learned a tremendous amount, and you're helping companies accelerate deals, maintain momentum throughout the pipeline. You're helping sales professionals, even like myself, be more successful and more effective in the real-time meeting. So that's what we're going to be talking about today is, how can we be more effective in the real-time, meeting experience, moving from meeting to meeting? How can we maintain deal momentum, etc. So, Larson, with that, do you mind just taking a minute and maybe introducing yourself a little bit more broadly and share a little bit about your background?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So for those who don't know me or haven't met me before, my name's Larson. As Chris said, I'm CEO and co-founder of Gondola. At the high level, my background, I originally started in medicine, actually. I was pre-med in college. I got into medical sales, but always had my eyes on tech sales. It's really where I wanted to land. I love the software space. It's near and dear to my heart. And I've actually known my current co-founder for about 14 years now. We've always wanted to start a company together. We've been working on different ideas, lots of which have failed. And as soon as I got into tech sales, as traditionally you start off as a BDR, SDR, and then I was fortunate enough to move into pre-sales, which is where a lot of the ideas for Gondola, what it is today, started there. And then I moved into a full cycle AE kind of role here. So sales has always been near and dear to my heart for over a decade now. How do you, make everyone better in terms of how they're having their conversations? How do we scale those sales best practices and make sure you have a sales experience that really delights your end customers? And so those are things that I'm really excited about and passionate about. And I'm excited to have the conversation here today.
Well, and I know just in talking with you, I mean, you're working certainly with sales leaders, you're working with sales teams, you're working with customer success teams now as well, in addition to pre-sales teams. What are some of the common challenges, regardless of the role? What are the common challenges that you're seeing for those customer-facing professionals that go meeting to meeting to meeting, day in and day out, that you are talking to leaders about these days?
Yeah, certainly. Well, and you're exactly right. I mean, we work with really anyone that's customer facing. So it can be anywhere from the SDR side to actually full cycle AEs, which is where the majority of our work extends, into pre-sales and then post-sales. But, if there's one unification, I think we can all agree that sales is based upon, human connection and relationships, right? But people are all different. And how do you encourage, better and more authentic conversations and relationship building there? It's quite challenging. And what organizations really want is they want consistency. They want to know, if I put this seller into place, whether it's on post-sale, pre-sale, wherever it is, how do I get them to build that authentic relationship, but do so in a way that's predictable and that's consistent and gets the outcomes that both parties really want? And this is a really tough problem. It's like, how do you, effectively scale a really good sales conversation? It's like, they're all nonlinear. You don't know which way it's going to go. It's a topic that I think is really interesting and extends across the entire sales cycle and post sale too. So
Yeah.
I think it's, how do you create consistency in something that feels impossible to create consistency in because it's unpredictable? But then also, like, we need that so we can get a deeper understanding of how's our pipeline moving, who's happy, who's not in terms of customers, where are the opportunities for upsell, how do we upsell those in the most authentic way possible, to really just build better business relationships is really the core theme that I'm seeing.
Well, and it's interesting. What comes to mind for me is how do we keep all of our people on message, right? How do we stay on message and sort of follow the plan, follow the approach, the methodology, but do so without sounding like robots, right? Do so without sounding like we're following a script, right? Do so in such a way that enables us to be our authentically, selves, our authentic selves, right? And create that human connection, create that human relation, but make sure that we're not missing important either key points, key questions, right? That we're sort of following the party line. And it sounds like that's sort of the challenge that you're taking on, right? Is how do I balance between, sort of following the playbook, but then being authentically real. By the way, and Larson, let me pause just for a moment. A buddy of mine, John Busey. John, I gotta say hello. I feel as though I'm watching the beginning of a strategic partnership. John, my friend, it's always good to see you. I'm glad you tuned in to say hello. And folks, if there's anybody out there that wants to say hello or ask Larson or myself a question, please feel free to do so. We actually don't have eyes on you, so we're not sure who's out there. So please say hello. John, my friend, I'm glad you said hello. It's good to see you. So Larson, am I touching on am I sort of hitting on the challenge here, that sort of how do I balance carrying the party line and yet be authentically myself and connect in real time?
Exactly right. And, we can get into some of the ways that we can enforce this and how do we create the systems of scalability and, create consistency in things that don't appear to be, make it tough in terms of scripting it, and how do you make it feel more genuine and authentic. There's lots of solutions out there that help with the retroactive component, right? It's like, hey, I just had, let's look at all my discovery calls over the past couple of months. Gong's a great, Gong, Clary, Zoom IQ, they're phenomenal for this. But now I know what I did wrong. How do I make sure I do it right moving forward? And so there's a lot that goes into that, because not all businesses are created equal. Not all people are created equal and identical in terms of how you work with them business wise. So that's exactly right, and that's some of the things that we're focused on the most right now.
And is it fair to say that the fact that we go from meeting to meeting to meeting, but in fact, I mean, folks, I literally showed up for my conversation with Larson 5 minutes before we started because I had workshops to run this morning, and I quote came in hot, right? So does this just make this problem that much worse, Larson?
I certainly think so. I mean, I don't know what everyone else feels out there, but I go back to back on meetings virtually all day, every day. Fortunately, with exception of weekends, it hasn't extended into weekends yet, but I'm probably running,
fine weekend.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah. Weekends where I get all my work done and then I talk to people during the week. And so there's a lot of strategy that I've thought up, and of course it blends into our product and all this stuff, but really it's like, it's a problem that I'm experiencing today because I need to be laser focused and create genuine connections, whether it's a prospect looking at buying, if it's an investor looking at investing, if it's an advisor just having good conversations. Like, nothing is worse or waste people time more than showing up and being like, so what should we talk about here? And it's just not guided. It's not structured. And it drives me crazy. And I hate being a part of conversations like that, where it has no roadmap, no direction. What's the purpose of this? And it's some of the things that I would focus really hard on in terms of creating structure and consistency in my own meetings, regardless of whatever the type of meeting it is.
So I love, I mean, the image that's coming to mind for me is GPS. It's like a GPS for the meeting. It's a GPS for the day. It's a GPS for the week. Right. Incidentally, a few of the folks chiming in. First of all, our good friend Carrie Sokolsky chiming in to complicate this, as you know, Carrie likes to do. AEs often disrespect SE's calendars and book them in back-to-back meetings without asking. Very good point, my friend. And Alex McFerrin, I hope I'm saying that correctly. Larson, question for you. Curious to hear how the custom post discovery demo fits into this conversation. What do you think? What do you think the goal of the custom post demo is? Now, Alex, by the way, thank you very much for your question. We're diving into a very specific scenario, but do you want to take a stab at commenting on Alex's question?
Yeah, it's a good question, but I think I need clarification. Custom post demo discovery. So is this the situation where we have run a demo, we're trying to do some deeper dive discovery or technical discovery after we've shown them a bit? Chris, is that kind of your sentiment there on Alex's question?
I would say so. I mean, to me, if here's the way I take this. If I've done a custom demo, it means I've spent a fair amount of time creating, configuring something very specific, very bespoke for this organization, right? Or for this group. And I do think that the post demo, either follow up conversation, and let's assume, right, it's a number of things that we need to do to keep momentum going.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of things you can do to get yourself ready for this. Well, I think there's two parts to this. There's consistency, but then also how do you just do it? So let's worry about consistency later. So how do you do this? When I was an SC, what I would do is as I'm building out the storyline that I'm trying to tell on this custom demonstration, right? I have discovery information that I've already uncovered. As you're digging through that data, you're probably uncovering pieces that might be missing, right? And I'm sure Carrie will get a kick out of this. AEs sometimes aren't great at running thorough discovery calls.
Come on, no, you're not saying that.
It's a cardinal sin, but it can happen at times. So when we uncover that information, you're pulling out your pieces that could be gaps, right, within the discovery information. And you might do some of that, and you have a hypothesis about what you're going to do your custom demo on. But I pull out like the things I want to uncover on the front half and the things I want to cover on the back half. And on the front half, it might be more standardized. It might say, hey, we're trying to do a technical discovery here. Here are the 3 bullets that I think are really impactful, Carrie, for us to dig in on. But on the back half is the roadmap. It's like there's variability on the back half. So you need to be prepared on, okay, if the answer A here, okay, we have 3 options on the back half in terms of what are the other roads that we could go down in terms of questions that we can ask, information we're trying to gather. And again, it's all about planning ahead of time. So it's kind of like it cascades a bit, but you need the prep on the back half because you know what you're going to cover. And then you specifically identify and articulate the things on the back half that you want to dig deeper on.
I absolutely love that. Yeah, it's a really interesting point, right? Like we know our points of entry, but then things happen during the meeting, and that sort of dictates sort of the not the necessarily the exit points, but like which of these paths are we going to take, and we need to be prepared to go in those directions. I want to go back to something you said just a few minutes ago because I want to double click on that, and that is you mentioned some of the tools that are out there, but you mentioned, you sort of alluded to the fact that you sort of have a process. And before we get too into tools and solutions, I feel like unless we develop certain methods and process, it doesn't, throwing tools at it doesn't matter.
Oh yeah.
And I know, having spent a little bit of time with you, that you've developed quite a process for yourself to manage all your meetings. And you I literally wrote these words down. You use the words laser focus. So what is the process that you follow so that you can maintain that laser focus, particularly when you are shifting gears so many times, different clients, investors, etc. Talk a little bit about the process you follow.
Yeah, for sure. So before we get into process, a fundamental belief that I have that is in full agreement with what you said there is if you slap technology and tools onto a problem that isn't well articulated, or you don't kind of know the solutions here, you're going to have more problems on your hands. And so anytime someone at our company at Gondola wants to buy a new piece of technology, I say, okay, great. How do you do it without that first? And what do you really want this to look like? What is the end state that you're trying to get to? And then it helps you more properly evaluate that technology, know what's going to work and what's not going to work. So I think that's really, really important. So let's certainly put technology over here because we need to know what is the problem. And like, if you're going to do it manually, how do you do it today? So that said, when you are running back-to-back meetings all day, when it can have variability between the types, that context switching can be so challenging. And how do you maintain focus in that conversation and make sure you're moving things along here. So what we do is I kind of think of it in phases almost, where I have like at the beginning of every week on Sunday, what I do personally is I go through and look at my entire week, and I actually do prep up every call for every day of the week on Sundays. And what this does for me is it's kind of a 3-phase approach, and the third phase we'll talk about in a second. But it helps me wrap my brain around what are high level things that I need to at least start to think about. Because at times, like the answers don't jump out to you. Like it's just, okay, this is the point of this call. This is what happened last time. I start to formulate that. And I don't want to include any other parties there to get started because I don't even have the ideas formulated yet. So it doesn't make sense. It could go off the rails here. And being the one that's working the deal or relationship, I know it better than anyone else on the team. So I need to start with myself, and I do that on Sundays. And, once I've kind of prepped up for my week, so let's say I prepped up 20, 30 calls for the week, everything's all set up, I kind of have some ideas. That's when our team review process comes in. So I bring in my director of sales, account executives that are working with me, and I say, this is my plan for the week when we're doing deal reviews or one-on-ones. We look at what are the most important deals that we need to get done. Let's use the sales example for right now, but certainly applies to others. And what are the key things that we really need to focus? And I present that to the team and say, hey, these are my gaps. This is what I've formulated as the plan. And they challenge me. That's the point.
Nice.
I don't know if I agree with you there. I think this should be this way, or this should be the focus. And we change and formulate the questions. There's your second phase, right? We're going from myself to the broader team where there's some challenging that can happen. And it can feel a little contentious at times, but it's all in an effort to be more laser focused on those conversations and have, repeatability in that sales cycle. And then the third kind of phase of it is certainly optional. It's really catered to enterprise organizations and enterprise deals, because at times, especially pre-sales and sales, we need to go in and have a deep one-on-one and say, okay, what is the storyline we're saying here? We gained consensus in the meetings and deal reviews that we did, but we need to work on this more. This is a really impactful deal for us. So we need to put some more work into this. So I kind of think of it in 3 different phases, which can feel like a lot of work at times, but it allows me to move back to back to back to back to back and still know my agendas, what I'm presenting or not presenting, and what's the point of the discussion here.
So first of all, I admire the heck out of you for taking your Sunday evenings and planning out your week and thinking through all the meetings through your week. For those of you who think you can take on that practice, I wish you the best. I am not sure that I can even do that. And Larson, I have to be honest. One of the reasons is because, let's say I've got a meeting on Friday morning. I'm the first to admit that if I spend some time thinking about it on Sunday, I'm not sure by the time Friday rolls around that I remember what it was that I was thinking. I'm not sure I know where those notes are. I'm a little bit disorganized at times. I'm sure my wife would say, no, you're a lot disorganized a lot of the time. So how do you sort of keep track of all these things and do sort of that planning with that sort of distance?
Yeah. It's a work in progress is everything, right? So I wouldn't say I'm batting 1,000 on this. Like there are times where deals come up ad hoc, or you get, there's a lot of other initiatives going on that week. So, but at times what I'll do is, I get my brain around the deal to get started, formulate some of those thoughts or ideas, present it to the team. There's a gap between those days. So usually it's about a day. So Sunday to Monday or Sunday to Tuesday is when we'll do it, more or less. And then I'll usually block out, whether it's 30 minutes ahead of time. To me, it's at a level of how important the deal is and how late stage it is too. Because it's a metric of like how much information do I need to absorb on the front half.
Yeah.
If it's a first call with somebody, I just need to do some background research on the person, the company. I can do that in about 5 minutes ahead of the call, and I have my standard set of questions. If we're later stage, I might need to review a call and gong and say, like, what specifically did they say on these spots? Right. And another thing that helps us too, to help us formulate this up, is after calls are done. So maybe this is, phase -1, if you will. After calls are done, a lot of times we debrief. We say 5 minutes, let's jump on a Slack huddle or a Zoom call and say, hey, what do we miss here? What should we do next time? What are the focuses? And we will actually prep that meeting immediately afterwards. And so it's kind of like this flywheel that needs to keep going. But I'd be lying to say when you have really high volume, like sometimes it can be challenging to keep up to speed on all these things. And I'm certainly not batting 1,000, but I'm getting better every week and every day in terms of how I prep and how do I keep the context super fresh in my brain.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I hear you saying is that you are constantly working on increasing both your effectiveness and your efficiency, right? To me, that's the constant balance, right? We could be highly effective, but many times to be highly effective slows the process down, right? Because we're looking in too many places. We're sort of doing too many things. So the challenge is how can we, to your point, how can we be laser focused on every meeting, right? How can we follow a plan? How can we shift mental gears and go from this client to this client, which is it's at a different stage, different engagement, right? Maybe different conversation, maybe different industry, etc. Right. But maintain sort of that focus, that authenticity, etc. So, something that I hear, and I suspect you hear from time to time as well, and I'm curious to hear if you have some thoughts on it, is oftentimes I hear, Chris, we're doing, we've got a plan, we've done some prep, but then we get in the meeting and it just goes haywire. Like it's like what it was as if we didn't even prep, right? Do you hear that? Do you see that? And what do you say to folks in that situation?
Yeah, we certainly see that a lot. What I would first say is you're ahead of the game because you do prep. Not everybody preps.
Well,
so you're ahead of the game. You're ahead of the game. So kudos to you. Step forward.
By the way, I know that to be true, but that does scare me. It petrifies me to think that sales professionals show up to meetings just planning to wing it. And I know it happens, but it does. That you're right. Let's start by just developing the habit of preparing more consistently. So nonetheless, so let's assume we've gotten there.
Yep. Yeah. So if you're doing your prep calls and you're setting up the conversation and it's still kind of falling flat, what I would question is how effective are your prep calls? How effective is your process? Are you really asking? Because what I think, looping back to the understand your process before slapping on tools and anything like that, like I think what we work with businesses on and customer bases and sales organizations and say, okay, if you're at discovery phase, what are the really, really important pieces of information you need to understand? How do you stay really focused on those key pieces and kind of reduce the fluff? Like, yeah, of course, we need the ability to expand if people are giving us this information, but we need to know what we're prepping for and how do we stay really focused? Because I think one of the biggest problems in sales, I'm sure a lot of people would agree with this, is we don't really dig. We only get surface level pain. So this is a problem. Why? Because I'm wasting time on it. You're like, great, sounds good. And then let me show you the product. And we're just like so eager to jump to the next step. And if we know what we need to focus on, gives us space to dig and layer in deeper. And we can dig deeper and deeper and deeper into that customer pain or the specific points that we know we need to uncover. And so, yeah, I'd say if your deals are falling flat still and you're doing the prep work, I would then go back and say, okay, well, what are you prepping on? What does the process look like? Are there things that we could tweak or change in addition to close loss analysis and say, like, why do we think these are losing? And when does that get asked or uncovered in the sales cycle? So I would say you're probably not being that effective. Your process probably isn't that effective. And there's probably areas to tweak it, make it a little bit better and allow for more focus too during calls.
Yeah. What's interesting to me, Larson, is, and by the way, folks, I'm talking to Larson Stair, the CEO of Gondola.ai. By all means, if you have any questions or comments for myself or for Larson, please don't hesitate to chime in or ask. If you just want to say hello, I invite you to do that as well. We don't actually have eyes on you, so we're sort of flying blind, just having a good conversation. But we always love to hear from you. What struck me a moment ago, Larson, is as we're talking about this conversation, we're talking about sales conversations and sales meetings. We're talking about momentum. And we haven't talked we really haven't talked too much about presenting the solution or giving the demonstration. We've talked mostly about discovery and prep and
Mm-hmm.
asking questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it occurs to me that that really is where I think deals are most won and lost, is in the early stage conversations where we're creating that alignment, we're building rapport. You mentioned building relationships. We're
Mm-hmm.
asking those questions that expose, whether or not our solution is even a good fit. And it's, to me, it's the things that we do before the meeting as much as what we do in the meeting that really makes a difference. Does this resonate with you? And is this what you experience for yourself and what you see out in the field as well?
Yeah, without question. I mean, I think because it's hard to predict what's going to happen in a conversation, when
Hmm.
you are in uncertain circumstances, the preparation is significantly more important, because then you're doing less ad hoc. You've thought through the scenarios more. So when those questions and variability does come up, you're prepared. Oh, you want to talk about competitor X, competitor Y. You want to talk about this feature or that feature, this integration, things that you may or may not have been ready for, whether it's on the demo or deeper down the line. That preparation work and thinking critically and questioning the deals you're working on
Mm.
is important, as opposed to thinking, why will this will close? Think, why won't they buy? Why won't this close? Where are the areas that could be problems? And sometimes this can be viewed as pessimistic, but I do think this is the right way to try to opt for, because then you reduce the happy years.
Yeah, why might it fail, right? Why
Mm-hmm.
might it die, right? Who,
Mm-hmm.
or even who might blow it up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how can we get that up? By the way, Sean Myers tunes in. Sean, it's always good to see your name and hear from you. Thanks for your kind words and for tuning in. So Larson, let's talk a little bit more about this notion of deal momentum.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
know, we've talked a little bit about some of the challenges of moving sort of in and out of deal or in and out
Mm-hmm.
of meetings throughout the
Mm-hmm.
day.
Mm-hmm.
You've talked a little bit about some of your planning, process and
Mm-hmm.
approach. I,
Mm-hmm.
I think, our ability to be able to shift gears quickly, day in. But what about going from one meeting to the next throughout the series, the context of a sales engagement?
Mm-hmm.
As many people have heard me say, I like to say, if you want to win more deals, we need to win more meetings. And I
Mm-hmm.
believe, one meeting begets the other. Talk about some of the things that you specifically do that helps you build one meeting to the next.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly. So I think momentum is a tricky thing in sales. It's a tricky thing to maintain. It's a tricky thing to
Mm.
build, and building is really tough. So a lot of the momentum starts at discovery, right? Having good business conversations, uncovering true business need, business pain, connecting that business pain to larger company initiatives and why we need to solve it now. And it's important. That's at the beginning of the call, right? It's important to reiterate that throughout the sales cycle. As I know that you said, Chris, is discovery is not a stage; it's an ongoing process throughout the sales cycle.
Yeah, discovery is a
And,
process. Yeah.
exactly. And so we need to uncover those pieces, but we need to continue to bring them up at the beginning half of the call and make sure that we're deeply understanding and confirming and digging a little bit deeper each time. So you don't have to go as far in depth, but that's an important part to start off calls, is say, hey, this is what we heard last time. I've been thinking more about this. I have this question. Okay, cool. Let's jump into things. So that's where it starts. But at the end of the call, this is where I think things are missed frequently. Is you've done a great job of uncovering business pain. You've created connections between pain, your solution, the value you bring. Now is the part where enabling buyers come into play. And how do you end a call on time, with enough time to talk through steps moving forward? Make sure you create enough space to book a meeting for the next follow-up discussion. And what are the steps going to be there? And so there's a space of time at the end of calls and end of every call where you have an opportunity to carry momentum forward or let it fall off. And so what we try to do all the time is review next steps that we all mutually discussed, with dates and times that's going to get done and people that it's going to be assigned to. questions that went unanswered throughout the discussion. These are my
Mm.
follow-up items as the seller. I need to get back to you on this. I do my best on every single call to try to book a meeting on the meeting. We say, hey, even if it's just a placeholder, let's schedule some time for next week. And then the fourth part is, that person that you just met with, regardless of where they sit in the hierarchy of a business, they have somebody they need to go talk to. Because rarely are people making decisions entirely in a vacuum. That just doesn't really happen. And
Doesn't happen. Yep.
So your job now is you just transferred information to them, and they need to go talk to people about that internally when they have 1,000 other things on their plate. And so how are you able to effectively enable them to articulate the value points and the messaging so they bring in additional people and the right people to the conversation, so that next one is set up for success? So there's a lot that goes into that deal momentum. It's on the front half of a call and on the back half of a call in terms of steps that you need to be taking.
Yeah. And from your perspective, as a thinking of it from the pre-sales engineer perspective, right? I think it's that much more difficult for the pre-sales engineer to keep up with sort of that deal progress, that deal momentum, because we may not necessarily be involved, certainly from the start. We may not necessarily be involved from, in each of the steps. Now, at some point, it might turn to maybe a proof of concept or a POV, or POC, or proof of value, as we call them, right? Our valuation, in which case we may take ownership. So when there's multiple people involved, right? How do we maintain that momentum when now it's sort of disjointed in terms of who's involved? Yeah. I know we have CRM, right? And we have Salesforce, and Salesforce may or may not be kept up to date. And the sales engineers may or may not actually go in, and the AEs may or may not, capture the information. What have you learned in the past couple of years, or around how do we keep the entire team on the same page and engaged?
Yeah, for sure. So I think there are a few facets to this, and there's gonna be some repeated things from earlier, but I think it's important is when you have the process laid out and well articulated throughout the organization, you at least get the entry level discussions off the table. It's like, we're at this stage, this is what we should be focused on as a generalization. So we're not doing work to get to a baseline. The baseline is set. And so we reduce a lot of questions in that sense. And we can get to the meat of what is custom to this organization or very unique or specific to whom I might be speaking with. What are the ins and outs of this business? So I think that is where you got to start, is make sure that we have a well-articulated process that is widespread and known throughout the organization. But from there, then, if you get the opportunity, well, first off, sales reps should be way better about putting information back into Salesforce, so we don't have to review all of these gong calls every single time. Like, Amen. If I have 20 meetings in a week and it's 20 hours to review all that, it's another 20 hours of gong calls. Yeah. It's just like, that's madness. And so, and a lot of times it's just not necessary. Like any other parties coming in, they have a role and responsibility in the sales cycle. So pre-sales might need to know the technical pieces in and out. What are the key value points in the solution that we need to be showing? The three things that really, really matter will move the needle here. And so that is both on the responsibility of whether you're doing it synchronously on a call internally, like we talked about earlier, a 30-minute prep call, setting up before the meeting happens, AEs and SEs come in, talk through the deal, make sure we have a good agenda and objectives for the call. But a world that I want to live in is where we don't have to do that every single time, like where we can actually come in and, you had a chance to review this information ahead of time. Yeah, it's all synced in Salesforce. All the data's in there. So data aren't in silos, which is a huge problem. But reps can come in and say, no, these are the three things. I don't even need to talk to you. I know what I need to do. And we have that working relationship established there. And so whether you're doing it synchronously, that's obviously easier to do it when you have the baseline process in place, or async, where you just look at the notes that I have in there. I really did a great job of discovery, ideally in the perfect world. And then all that information is back in there. You know what you need to present. And we're taking it 2 layers of questions deeper. And then we really just get to the essence of the true questions that need to be answered.
Yeah. Yeah. So love that. And what comes to mind, a couple of things come to mind. First of all, you mentioned sort of having that process, the thought comes to mind is we don't want to reinvent the wheel every time we have a deal, right? Like we shouldn't be going back to sort of ground zero. Okay, now how do we approach this, right? How do we do, right? There should be some fundamental approach, methodology, process in place, right? So we get through, let's everybody make sure we're on the same page, right? By the way, it reminds me of habit one in the 6 habits to partner with our sales counterparts, right? Like a big part of the partnership is establishing expectations, right? Setting process, setting cadence, getting an agreement on how do we fundamentally approach, right?
Yep.
And as I think through the 6 habits, habit number 2 is to probe. So it's all around discovery. And we've been talking a lot about discovery. Habit number 3 is to prepare. And we've certainly been talking a lot about prep. And you've provided some ideas on, I have almost 3 stages of prep. I do my own personal prep, right? I may bring the team in to do some prep. And if I have some specific one-on-one prep that I can do, obviously there's there may be some practice involved there.
Certainly.
Perform, right? At some point we actually have to deliver, and that's really that real-time meeting. And then obviously perfect is sort of it's that follow-up and that's that debrief. But by the way, I have to say hello to our friend Russ, and I think it's Lujan. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Russ, it's nice to see you, my friend. Thanks for tuning in. Larson, I want to talk a little bit about, and you mentioned this is the world that I want to live in, is that these things sort of happen more automatically and sort of organically, if I can use that term. I know that the platform that you now sell in the market, that you've now brought to the market, is really designed to help organizations do a lot of what we're talking about. I know when you launched your business a little over 2 years ago, it started out as Demoflow, and I was actually impressed with the solution because it was I called it a browser with superpowers for sales engineers. But your business has obviously changed names. The platform has evolved a great deal. It's now Gondola, and it's taken on a very sort of new shape and really solution in the marketplace. Can we shift gears a little bit and talk about that for a few minutes?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So how would you describe that shift from more of a sort of a demo focused tool to now really, let's say, a sort of a sales enablement, sort of meeting enablement tool?
Certainly. So, coming from pre-sales, demos is what was near and dear to my heart. It's the singular point in the sales cycle that I was a part of. Like, yeah, I got brought into some discovery calls, but this is what I owned. This was my space. And I just noticed a ton of inconsistencies out there. Reps some would do great demos, some would do horrible demos, but there was no unification of this. And even from inception with Demoflow, we always saw it as like a workflow. How do you do the workflow of preparing for the product demonstrations you have coming up, or the information that you need to be referencing, making sure that you're fluid in the call and moving different assets as that's needed, and then the follow-up pieces of this. So like we kind of have always been of a workflow around the demonstration. And what really came to light is a few things. Is, well, demonstration is a singular call in a sales cycle, and there's so many similarities between what we do on a demo. Take the slide decks or demo environments, prepping for all that out of the equation. Like what we're doing is similar to what we do on discovery calls, and similar to what we do across the entire sales spectrum, even into post sale. There's a lot of similar actions that are happening, referencing what happened last time, key piece of information, creating objectives for the call. What are we doing on this call? Preparing or presenting, not presenting, just asking questions, some follow-up pieces. Like there's unification throughout this. And so that was the broader learning that we had. And also the other thing is, Demoflow, and Gondola is certainly now, was always collaborative. It was always built for AESC collaboration and collaborative product demonstrations. That's how we built it from inception. And what we believe is that great demos start at great discoveries. Discoveries just make sure that discovery call is really well thought out and digs deep on customer pain. And so it was a natural expansion point for us. But what we've learned is that this should be something that's used across the entire sales spectrum or even customer journey, which is why we're seeing draws from customer success now, certainly account executives. We still have a space within pre-sales, of course, but it's just around entry points and what are the best things for us to start as a solution. And so that's kind of what it's brought into is just a solution that helps to manage all, go to market customer facing interactions and create consistency there.
So there's a couple words that I wrote down that I'm inclined to double click on, because to me that what I'm hearing is this is the essence of Gondola and what it does. First of all, it's workflow, and you started out sort of more in the context of workflow or flow of a demo, but really it's really workflow throughout the funnel, right? Because we have a series of meetings, we have a process to follow, we have multiple team members involved, and this helps maintain and really automate, really define the workflow, and then help us maintain and follow the workflow. That's number one. Number two is fluidity. We were talking about efficiency and effectiveness, right? And what you're creating is a platform that helps create a fluid sales motion throughout the funnel. And in my mind, again, I know for me, when I have multiple deals that I'm working and I have multiple meetings, it's hard for me to maintain that fluidity. And what I hear you saying is this is a platform that helps with that.
Yep.
The other word that I wrote down is unification. Is it brings us all on the same, it gets us all on the same page.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit more specifically about some of the things some of the specific capabilities that enable some of these, workflow, fluidity, unification, et cetera?
Yeah, certainly. The space that we will forever operate in as a platform is live meetings, live conversations, literally just like this. I actually literally have it pulled up alongside of this screen right now that I'm looking at. I have key talking points. Chris and I prepped yesterday. We got ourselves all set up. And so I practice what I preach here. And so, it's really all about this live conversation. How do we make the most out of this? So this stems back to all the best practices that we were talking about earlier. Is how do you get yourself ready? How do you get the internal parties that are going to be a part of this ready? And making sure that we're making really efficient use of this time. And so we really kind of help to codify the processes that we talked about on the front half. Every organization, I've talked with hundreds of organizations now, both pre-sales and sales. And what I'm saying at the front half of this discussion is not super unique. I'm not super novel by saying that you should prep for calls, right? You should do an internal sync. You should be laser focused in these conversations. These aren't novel ideas, to be clear here. This is not something unique or out of left field. Everyone knows this, but building the process to make this a reality is a much more challenging thing. And so that is some of the things that we're focused on and passionate about. Is you have two internal parties, whether it's manager, managee, AE, SC, SDR, AE, that come together and we say, this is what I know so far. This is what I think we should be working on during this meeting. Here's the variability that could happen, the information we need to understand based upon the overarching process that we've put into place. So there's less guesswork on and debate on what should be gathered. And so this is what the space that we operate in. And we help to codify the processes that nearly every single organization I've met with want to be codifying.
Yeah. Well, and the word that came to mind, not just process, but discipline. Right. We all know we should be doing these things. Do we have the discipline to do it? Right. And I actually I have you triggered a thought. You mentioned that you and I had a chat the other day, and you took some notes when about sort of what we were going to talk about today. And you have I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. So you have some sort of panel on your computer right now that has all of your prep notes for all of your meetings, and that's at your fingertips. So as you move from meeting to meeting to meeting, all of those prep notes, whether it was from yesterday or from Sunday or 2 weeks ago, is right there at your fingertips.
That's exactly right. I have 4 or 5 more calls later today. All my notes are already prepped. My objectives are prepped. I know exactly what I need to do. And it just gives me also the ability to really be more present in the current meeting that I'm in and not thinking future. We actually do have two significant big meetings for us later today that we're excited about, but I want to be present in this moment. And I have the confidence, no, I'm already prepped up for that. I don't need to do anything. I'm good. And so you're exactly right. I'm literally looking at right here, and it's more or less a view that's my calendar for the day. And I can pop in and out of different meetings. I have Zoom pulled open or whatever screen share platform is there. It just allows me to be more fluid and just have the confidence I know that I'm ready to go.
The other thing, and I'm inspired to share this observation that I have and what I know of Gondola is that in that panel, and let's talk about those other meetings, that not only in that panel do you have your prep notes, but you've also got, if there's any specific sort of approach or questions or anything that you plan to ask, that's already primed. And if you plan to present or demonstrate anything, that's already there as well. So you also have the peace of mind knowing that not only your notes are there, but you're not going to be looking for PowerPoints. You're not going to be looking to pull up it. Like, it's all right there. Like, you can literally end this meeting. If we were to end at 1 o'clock Eastern, you could literally end this meeting at 1 o'clock Eastern, fire up the next meeting, and instantly everything you need is right there. Am I saying the truth?
That is exactly right. And, to add on top of that is, so it really is kind of twofold. It's like, if I'm presenting or not. So if I'm not, it's like, what do I want to say? What information do I want to uncover? And, within our solution, you can literally get a holistic view of your entire pipeline, all the deals or information you're trying to work, and easily identify gaps, which help to guide the next conversation. So we see those gaps. We say, okay, I should focus on this thing, and this thing. What questions do I want to ask that could inspire those answers? Yes, it's all synced back to Salesforce, so that's all up to date. But I'm punching the information right in there. So that's already, I have my call objectives there. In the same vein, like, I have access to all of my content or marketing collateral that my company put together, including, slide decks, customer case studies, business cases, including browsers too. So if there are specific parts of the platform or different pieces that could be relevant to show, I have a whole library at my disposal, both before the call, so I can select and pull in the things that are relevant, but also live during it. So I can change course, pivot, make a tangent, anything like that. So it just gives me the ultimate flexibility for live conversations.
So again, I'm going to repeat what I think I'm hearing to make sure that I understand it correctly, and to make sure any of our viewers or anybody who listens to this after the fact understands. So in this one panel, and in essence, what I have is I have my CRM open because I can take notes that will go to my CRM. In essence, I have PowerPoint because I can have all my slides with speaker notes and that sort of thing. I have a browser because if I want to pull up and actually present, give a live demonstration from that very panel, I can do that as well.
Yep.
I actually have a way to communicate with. Is there some sort of way to communicate with my colleagues? If I were one of 2 or 3 people from my organization on this meeting, they would be seeing the same thing that I would be seeing. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
So that's all in one panel, and that panel is called Gondola.
Exactly right. Yeah. It's a little Chrome extension, sits right alongside Zoom, allows you to, more collaboratively prep up for calls, run those calls with colleagues, communicate privately, view notes that others are taking, navigate slide decks or presentations together. That's exactly right.
It seems, honestly, it seems to me like it is sort of the one-stop shop for what you need during the live meeting. Is really everything I need going into the meeting, everything I need during the meeting, and all the important stuff that comes out of the meeting. Is that a fair way to put it?
That's well said. That's exactly right.
And thereby, if I know what I need going into the meeting, if I have everything that I need at my disposal during the meeting, and I have clarity on what we've captured coming out of the meeting, then I can reasonably expect deal momentum,
Mhm.
because that is, to me, that's the definition of maintaining deal momentum, is going into every meeting with everything you need, having everything you need, at your fingertips,
Mhm.
having even checklists of things we should be looking for, and then having clarity on what's coming out.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and all of those things wrap up into deal momentum. And I mean, sales is a numbers game, of course, but what we're doing is reducing risk to help to ensure positive momentum. If you do the right things, it's not going to work every time, but you have a higher likelihood that it'll work and that you'll maintain that momentum. Deals will move forward. You get your next steps. We go broader in this sales or the organization we're working with. All of these are just pieces of an equation that end in a deal momentum and close one revenue. It's not going to work like that all the time, but the more disciplined you are in your process, how you're preparing, how you're being more fluid, thinking through the variability in a conversation, so on and so forth, the higher likelihood you are to close those deals and generate happy customers, which is what we're all doing here.
Of course. I have to admit, Larson, I don't think this was your goal today, but I must admit I'm a little cranky with myself that I have not been using Gondola on a more regular basis, and so I'm realizing that you've given me a lot of things to think about in terms of my own process and what I can be doing to better manage my time, my meetings, because I must admit I'm probably still a little bit of, like there's a little bit too much chaos going into meetings, and I somehow manage to calm myself and do what
Mm-hmm.
needs to be done, but then there's a little bit of chaos coming out of meetings. So you've given me some things to think about in terms of improving my own process and how I could be, better leveraging this capability that you guys have brought to the market. Any closing thoughts, anything maybe that we haven't covered, either in terms of, some of the discussions you're having with the folks out, just sales leaders or sales professionals
Mm-hmm.
out in the profession, or anything maybe that we haven't sort of touched on, in terms of Gondola and sort of where you
Mm-hmm.
guys are or where you're headed.
Yeah, I think maybe the thing that I would say is, product aside, is, how do we scale effective? Like you think about the best sales cycles or best sales people that you ever met, is how do you distill down what they do really great, bottle that up, and make sure everyone else gets that piece and knows what to do. And are they going to do it as effective as anyone else? That's up for debate. That's the goal that we have, is how do you make sure every seller operates like the top 1%? I get that's a very lofty goal because it's quite a bit of a challenge there. But and what I will say is I'm glad that I've inspired you to take a deeper look, and it resonates with you a bit going back to back meetings. And one thing I can say with certainty is I actually am our number one power user at Gondola across our entire user base. This is partly because I just have an absurd amount of meetings in a week. That's one reason, but I also stretch and try to think of the edge use cases here. So if any of this resonates with anybody out there, like our product aside, like I'm happy to strategize or come up with ideas on how we can make you as an individual seller or IC more effective in your day to day, make your calls more effective. Or if you're a leader that's like, man, we just rolled out MedPick or Medic or Spin Selling or Chandler, any of those different methodologies. I can't get my reps to follow the process. I'm trying to create more consistency. I'd be happy to have conversations with there because there's a lot of stuff that I've learned throughout the past couple of years and just working with hundreds of different orgs. So I know a few things in terms of best practices there, and certainly we have solutions and all that to help. But we'd love to have a conversation with anyone that's either trying to improve themselves individually or their broader team.
So love that. And talk a little bit about how can people, I think I saw on your website that you're a partner, you're a Zoom. Am I correct? You're on the Zoom app platform
That's
or
right.
something. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So, one of the added benefits and something that's quite unique about what we do is, yes, we have a browser extension so you can work on any screen share platform out there, but we are the most, tightly coupled with Zoom. I believe that they're one of the front runners in the space right now, if not the front runner. And so our application is actually embedded into the Zoom desktop app. And so you can access all your Salesforce data, make updates to the opportunities you're working there, run presentations. It's all embedded right in there. And so it helps with accessibility and making sure we're getting the adoption that we need and that people are actually following the process because it's right there at your fingertips. And so we launched that last July, and we were one of the first 50 apps actually to get launched there, which is pretty cool. I think quite a bit more have come up there, but I think we're still, someone will have to fact check me on this. I think we're still the only one that allows you to update Salesforce from Zoom, which is kind of a unique moat that we have there. I believe so. Someone might fact check me, but I believe that's true still.
Very. So if I'm interested in testing out Gondola, I can click the Zoom apps and search Gondola under the Zoom apps. That's a download, and that gives me that panel that we were talking about to do those things.
Yeah, and probably the easiest way, if you're interested in testing it out, whether it's the Zoom app or browser extension or whatever it might be, is just go to our website, Gondola.ai. Click, you can just go through the workflows there of requesting time and gaining access, and we'll get you set up there. Because at times it depends on how your org has set up Zoom, depending on if you get access to it or not. And so we can help work through a lot of those processes and getting things through those procurement levels and getting you something that you can test out here. But happy to give anyone a license to test out and see if it could be a good fit for them.
Fantastic. Well, I'm going to take you up on that offer because I need to clean up my process, and you've inspired me to get myself better organized. My friend, if you can believe it, we've been at this for almost an hour. And you've been a wealth of knowledge, folks. For those of you who hung around, thank you so much for joining us. Larson, final question for you: how many times have you jumped out of an airplane in the past year?
Oh, it's been down. It's been really down. Busy. Those just excuses, though. I'd say call it 20 times. I bet you I've jumped out of an airplane about 20 times. I usually do about 50 to 70 a year, so I think that might. You're
way down, man. You're down around 1 or 2 a month. I mean, yeah, come on,
that's way down, about 1 or 2 a month, and I'm about 370 so far total jumps that are solo. So I love it, but every once in a while I get a chance to do it.
Well, hey, you got to grow up at some point. So,
I guess. I don't want to.
I mean,
though,
you and me both. Larson, thank you so much for joining me on the program. I love talking to you. I love hearing about the business. I love hearing about the people you're talking to, some of the problems and challenges. I'm unbelievably impressed by your process. Folks, check out Larson Stair. Connect with him online, go to Gondola.ai, check out their product, get the download on Zoom. And thank you so much for tuning in. If you like these, I encourage you to follow #TechSalesAdvice. Of course, you can go to TechSalesAdvisors.com to check out some of the training that we do. You can also go to demodoctor.com to get some online training. Larson, thank you very much, sir. I wish you the best for the rest of the year. And to those of you who hung around, thanks so much. We will talk to you next time. Thanks, Larson.
Chris. Bye-bye.
Stick around for just a minute. I'm going to give you your parting gift for the others. We'll see you next week. Thanks all.
See you next